Okay, thank you everybody. I'm sure you've all seen we've got a very busy agenda tonight. You can tell by the number of people in the room as well. So let's get going and keep focused. Good evening and welcome to Crawley Borough Council's Overview and Scrutiny Commission, the meeting of the 6th of October 2025. I'm Councillor Justin Russell, Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Commission. There are no scheduled fire drills tonight, so in the event of a fire alarm sounding, please leave the building via the main spiral staircase through the main reception doors. Once outside, turn left and make your way to the fire assembly point located beyond the multi-storey car park on Exchange Road. If you're unable to use the stairs, please wait in the council chamber and you'll be guided by a member of staff to the evacuation lift. This meeting is being live streamed via the council's YouTube channel. Please note there is a no comments function available as part of this webcasting. The council is the data controller and will retain the data collected during this webcast. This will be done so in accordance with the council's published data retention policy. Any members of the public seated in the public gallery, there aren't any, so I'll leave that bit. Councillors are reminded to take note of what is displayed on the screens in the room, as this shows what is being recorded and webcast. Cameras are currently set to capture you in seated positions, so please remain seated when speaking. You can request to speak as usual in committees by raising your hand, and I will try and make a note of everybody that wishes to speak. To speak by pressing the button with the face on it, and the microphone will go green when you are live. Don't forget to turn it off when you've finished. Before we start the agenda items, I intend to change the order slightly, swapping over the HRA business plan and budget strategy items. But also, can I just acknowledge and say thank you to Heather, because I know there's been a great deal of work right to the last minute on the agenda. So thank you very much for all the work there. Okay, so we'll start the meeting with apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies for absence?
None, Chair.
Okay. Disclosures of interest for whipping declarations. I would like to start with making a declaration on item 5. As somebody that's spent 30 years organising acts of remembrance and fundraising with the Royal British Legion. Are there any other? Okay.
Yes, I've got a declaration on item 10 because I'm an NHS Foundation Trust Public Governor. Thank you.
Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair. Also on item 10, personal interest as West Sussex County Council Cabinet Member for Public Health and Wellbeing.
Councillor Hart.
Excuse me, personal interest in item 5, as I am very heavily involved with the Crawley Armed Forces Veterans Breakfast Club.
Okay, thank you. Are there any others? Now we come to the minutes of the last meeting held on the 1st of September. Does the Commission agree these minutes? Are they agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Right, public question time. We don't have anybody in the public gallery, so we will move on from there. And to item 5. And we go on to item 5. We now move to consideration of the first item, which is the Tilgate Park War Memorial Petition. Can I now ask Councillor Chris Mullins and Cabinet Member for Leisure and Wellbeing and Georgina Buett, Head of Community Services, to present the report, and following this, I will open up for discussion to the Commission.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank the OSC as well for inviting me to address this item tonight. It's an opportunity for me to explain the background to it, and I therefore do appreciate that opportunity. The background to it, if you don't mind, I'm going to read parts of the report because I think that will make it clearer. In 2018, a painted mural depicting fallen soldiers, including the names of the soldiers originating from Crawley, was started on a section of the wall garden perimeter wall adjacent to the cafe. This was not commissioned by Crawley Borough Council and was not or did not have any permission directly given. The artist was associated with the CAF manager. Whilst permission was not given and the mural was being painted without the council's consent, the park manager at the time did not prevent the completion of the mural. It was therefore completed on a temporary basis as a feature which attracted recognition, including attendance from local councillors in their individual capacity, and was posted on the council's Facebook page. Subsequent discussions to investigate the removal started. However, these stopped with the COVID lockdown, as there was a reprioritisation of the work of council's officers and the priority that COVID took. The artist requested an extension of the mural in 2022, and the council reiterated that the main mural was painted without consent and refused any extension. Previous instructions were given to the artist not to continue and not to add to the mural. Since 2023, the council received no direct notification of the renovations being undertaken to the mural. Changes in park management in the past 2 years and discussions with the CAF operator's regional office have included a plan to remove the mural, initially to coincide with the rebranding of Tilgate Park and Zoo. At a meeting on the 4th of January 25, the council was notified that between the 27th and 29th of January 25, the CAF was required to close to undertake electrical work, which was being notified to the Cabinet Member for Leisure and Wellbeing. It has long been the view of the council that the mural would need to be removed. This closure of the CAF enabled this to be done with a minimum of disruption to visitors and staff. In consultation with the Cabinet Member for Leisure and Wellbeing, i.e. myself, a decision was taken to remove the mural at this time. A work order to the council's in-house intensive cleaning team was raised. I'll move on a little bit then. The mural was removed in February. It had been put up without permission several years ago and had fallen into disrepair and realistically was beyond proper restoration. The wall had been put back, has now been put back to its original state. Can I make it clear that we did not paint over the mural? It was actually removed and cleaned off. It is no longer there at all. We have recognised a recognised history in Crawley of supporting all of those who have served and who are currently serving to protect our country. As a council, we will be happy to work with any group to find an appropriate alternative location to pay tribute to our service personnel. We are fully committed to supporting our veterans and those serving in the forces. We did support VE Day with a beacon lighting ceremony, and we maintained a permanent memorial in our memorial gardens. It's on the gate. You can go and see it there. We put that up. I think it was about 2 years ago now, and there is a new memorial to commemorate the First World War. The park's budget does not include funds for public art or for maintenance or for the repair of the mural. And as it had fallen into disrepair, it simply was removed. The council is not considering reinstating the mural because this is not the right location for it. A further decision by the Cabinet in light of the petition will be provided to the principal petitioner. The report provided the background to the original decision and why it was taken. Proposal, the council speaking with the veterans groups about what had happened and is working with them on this issue. While we are not considering reinstating the mural, I keep saying mural, don't I? It's a name. We are speaking to the veterans about whether there is a particular aspects which they consider are missing from other memorials within the town, or any other aspect that should be memorialised in another way. These conversations are ongoing, and we're very, very happy and willing to cooperate with the armed services in making a further provision in a suitable place in the town. We go on. The 5-year business plan for Tilgate was approved by the Cabinet in 24 and gave permission for a rebranding of the park and zoo to support the vision and create a family-friendly leisure destination. The park offers beautiful natural landscapes and a number of special formal gardens, including the Peace Garden, which was created to commemorate World War II. And I did participate in some of that when poor Ted Rogers died. He was a veteran who wrote the words of peace in that garden, and his ashes are actually buried there. The wall garden is shared space where the park hosts weddings, events such as Magical Christmas, and is a gateway to the zoo, and so has a special place and attraction where families enjoy the sunshine and amenities of the park. The council is committed to supporting the armed forces, and a joint working with the military partnerships is facilitated by the Crawley Military Partnerships Board, comprising of the following key stakeholders and the activities outlined before. There's a whole list: the 4th Battalion Princess of Wales Royal Regiment, Crawley and Horsham Armed Forces, the Armed Forces and Veterans Breakfast Club, Crawley District and British Legion, Soldiers, Sailors, Airmen and Families Association, South East Reserve Forces and Cadet Association, South East Regional Employees, 11th Brigade British Army and South East Regional Military Command. We work with all of those people to ensure that this town respects and honours those people who've served on behalf of this country. Signing a military covenant in 2013, it demonstrated the council's commitment to the armed forces within the borough. We also deliver an annual Armed Forces Day every year since 2013, led by the council and supported by local military partners, bringing together serving personnel and veterans and the civilian population. The council has allowed an operational budget of 2,000 and significant officer time is given in addition to the budget and to organise and to ensure the event is a success. I go to that every year myself. Through the Council Small Grants Programme, a total funding of nearly £2,000 since 2022 has been awarded to Crawley Horsham Armed Forces and the Breakfast Club to support local activity. Continued housing support for veterans. With the housing needs, the team gives due regard to veterans as when they approach the council for housing. Regular meetings with military partners through the Crawley Military Partnership Board to coordinate initiatives. Achievement of the Defence Employer Recognition Scheme Silver Award by demonstrating our high-level commitment to our armed forces in Crawley. And in consultation with Crawley Civil Military Partnership Board, the council purchased a stone to commemorate the fallen soldiers from, I mentioned this before, from Crawley from World War I, which was installed on the gates of the Memorial Gardens with a small ceremony. That's there for anybody to go and have a look at. The council operates a Crawley Heroes Welcome Home scheme, and the British Armed Forces to receive discounts from participating retailers in local businesses. Chair, that's generally the background to it, but I did have a small announcement to make in associating with it, just to finish up. And it says, I'm pleased to update you successfully obtained written agreement and support from John Johnson of the Royal British Legion for the Tilgate plaque, which we're proposing, to commemorate those Crawley soldiers who worked at Tilgate Park and fell in the Great War. And that's one thing that we want to provide, probably somewhere suitable in the park itself. And we will be talking and going up to have a look at the various sites up there that we think might be suitable, to make a decision about where to place it. Obviously, it wants to be placed where people will see it. And that's it really, Chair. I'm pleased to say that we've made that agreement with John Johnson, and we can go forward with that part of it and to see what we can provide. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much for the comprehensive reply. I'll now open this up to councillors. Are there any questions? Councillor Lancer.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Munnins. Really a very comprehensive position there. And I comment to begin with that there's no doubt about this council's commitment to supporting our armed forces and supporting our veterans, as you've ably described. And we were an early signatory of an armed forces covenant within the country, I would say. And I signed it on behalf of the council in 2013. And you've described the subsequent commitments that have flowed from that. However, what we're considering today is the specific content of a petition. I had a few comments, but I had one question as well. The report and yourself mentioned that the mural was posted on the council's Facebook page. I suppose the obvious question there is who posted it, or did the council post it? And if the council posted it, that would be quite a significant difference, if you see what I mean. And also, I welcome your announcement of the initiative you've got with respect to the Great War and people who fell in the Great War. It might be that we need to do more in consultation with veterans and others. It might be that we need to do more if they're agreeable to more fully reflect the content of the original mural. I think part of the problem we've had here is, and I suppose it's a problem we often have in politics, is appearing to do something by surprise. And whatever processes went through, there was a sense of surprise for a lot of people, which is why you got this public interest generated, which is why you got a petition generated, and a perception, rightly or wrongly, of a lack of transparency. And when we refer, of course, to the mural itself, one piece of reasoning you've used is that no permission was originally given in 2018. That piece of reasoning standing alone wouldn't necessarily be enough, because, of course, I draw an analogy. Our planning committee quite regularly gives retrospective approval for applications or elements of applications despite permission not having been granted in the first instance. More significant is your remark that the mural was dilapidated or falling into dilapidation, and I think when you add that piece of reasoning, the justification is stronger. So I think, again, I return really to the clearly, I think you're giving a commitment, hopefully I've heard you correctly, to, although you've said no reinstatement as is, it might be possible to achieve a kind of reinstatement in agreement with relevant parties in terms of the content of the original mural, but in different locations, which I think would be a positive thing to do. But I come back to, I think the central point here is that you introduced an element of surprise for a good number of people who cared about what was on that mural.
Do you wish to respond?
Yeah, thank you. Who posted on Facebook? We don't know. As you know, I don't do social media myself. I keep away from it like it's a disease. But people can put stuff on there, and you know, I mean, they're open forums, aren't they? So we're not entirely sure who placed it on there. Certainly, any councillors that got involved in it, they weren't formally involved in it. We've had no formal gatherings with that or around that mural at all, and so people might have taken the decision to do things themselves, and they're quite at liberty to do that at all times. That's right that they should. I do accept that it came as some surprise, but it did take till nearly April for them to notice it, which was rather a long time from when the point when it was removed to when somebody realised that it was no longer there. That's just one of those things that had to happen because we were doing the work up at the wall garden at the time. It was a suitable time to do that work, and that work needed to proceed. I take full responsibility here tonight for the decision that was made, because I was asked if I would agree to go ahead, and I said yes. So if the buck stops anywhere, Chair, it stops with me. I made the decision, and I, instructed the officers to move ahead and do the work. And I'm not sorry I did that, because it needed doing. I didn't have any intention of upsetting anybody, however. There was no permission, and it was dilapidated. And the thing is that we've had, some people might have noticed, Chair, that we've had lots of murals being painted around the town, and they're being done by professionals, and they're using special acrylic paints and things, and they're long-serving murals that are properly designed and professionally done, and done with the permission of this council and in cooperation with this council. And we understand what it is that they're going to paint each time, and they're starting to make the town look rather beautiful as you walk around, and I'm quite proud of those. First of all, this was done in an amateur way. The paint wasn't substantial paint. It was unstable, and the reason that we needed to actually remove it in the end and clean it off was you couldn't put further paint on top of unstable paint, because that would have peeled off as well. So we had to take the thing back to the wall, because it was so poorly done, really, to be in all honesty, and it wasn't what you would call a quality job. And if we'd contracted that job, we'd have had terms and conditions associated with it, and we'd have had a maintenance agreement with it as well. None of that occurred, and none of that happened. In terms of localities, I still maintain very strongly that the wall garden is not the right place to be putting what is really, I've got a picture of it here actually, if anybody wants to see it, quite a dark and dreary mural in black and white, which actually has a dead body on it. But the wall garden's a place where we have weddings, birthdays and enjoyment. We have children's parties. People go to Tilgate Park to enjoy themselves and to have fun. There is a place for memorials, and I would always support those memorials being in the places that they're in now. But that place is not the right place, and therefore we've taken the decision that whatever happens now, we won't put that or anything like it back in there again. But we will look to make the wall garden the most enjoyable of places for our families to come and visit. Have I answered all your questions, Bob?
Well, there was only one.
Well, it was a long one then.
Okay, I've got two others who indicated they want to speak. Councillor Lunnan and then Councillor Hart.
Thank you. I guess my first question is, you say it was dilapidated. Have we got any images of how dilapidated it was, just to see the state of it, just so we can help it? And then also, could we just clarify how much it cost to remove the item from the wall garden?
Chair, I haven't got figures for removal, but our normal graffiti team was used, and it was removed in the normal way. They go around the town doing this sort of work all the time, so it's a constant activity that they do. So I don't suppose we would have costed it in that way, in all honesty.
Okay, I'll look at the images later. The second question is, you sort of touched on it, but if you could just be clear, were you surprised by the reaction from the public on this petition in response to the removal of it?
Well, not entirely surprised. I mean, anything to do with memorials is quite an emotional subject, and you have to have understandings about that, and I do. Yeah,
just one final. I mean, I guess if if you weren't surprised, you must have somewhat anticipated this reaction. So could we have prevented some of the reaction from the public by anticipating it a bit better?
I don't think so. I think the work needed doing when it needed doing, and we're going to work with our forces organisations now to see what it is they want to do next.
One last one.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to drive at is what might you have done differently in hindsight to sort of mitigate this reaction?
Well, in all honesty, I don't think I'd do anything different. If I was doing this again, I'd do exactly the same.
Okay. Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Thank you for your report, Councillor Mullins. I have been involved with the Breakfast Club for a good number of years now, and I have received quite a lot of the comments from them regarding the removal. As Councillor Mullins stated, it wasn't actually commented on until May Bank Holiday, and I think part of the problem was that the discovery or the realisation of what had happened, it was so close to VE Day on the 8th of May, which didn't go very well with the veterans. But what I would say is that personally, I think it was the right memorial for the World War One. I personally like the black and white depiction of it, with the list of the fallen from Crawley, but it was in the wrong place. I totally agree, it was in the wrong place. And having had meetings with the Crawley Military Partnership, one of the questions that was asked was, has anybody got any suggestions of where it might go? And I've taken that up. I've taken that upon myself to take that up, and talking to the people involved with the suggestions. Let's put it that way. And I would like to see it done again, but in the right place. I totally agree with Chris that it's not suitable in Tilgate Park. But I do think Crawley is a big enough town and had enough people, men mainly, from Crawley to warrant a memorial of that size, but hopefully in a better place. So my question is, excuse me, if a better place can be found, would the council in any way fund it, or would it have to be privately funded?
The funding is a question we haven't arrived at yet. I mean, it's interesting to know that if you look at the Memorial Gardens and what really is a well-represented presentation of the First World War down there, because the Memorial Gardens really are really all about the First World War, and it's been well designed and well done, and was all built by public subscription at the time on public appeals, and that's how they did it. So, I mean, that's an example of how we could do it, by sharing the cost with the public. I don't know. I mean, we haven't really got as far as that, because until you decide what you're going to do, you don't know how to work out the price for it. So we haven't got that far, Jill.
Okay, got two more that suggest they want to speak. Councillor Rana.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to ask Chris. Chris, you mentioned that the memorial is kind of dark and dreary. And say once you find a suitable place for it, will you make it a little bit colourful, or will it still stay dark and dreary? That's my question, thank you.
I can answer that. I mean, I don't know whether we would actually put another memorial up. It depends what the armed services want in the end. I mean, for me, I would like some sort of obelisk or statue or something like that, which you could associate that, and it could. We've got plenty of places where something like that, which wouldn't be absolutely enormous, but would be very important and long-lasting. The thing about murals is that they deteriorate. Any paint just deteriorates. So when you put it on a wall, as the years go by, it fades, it peels, it flakes, and even with the best quality paints, like the acrylic paints that the artists are using these days, they're not going to last forever. But if you add something like a bronze or a stone obelisk or something like that, it would last for 100 years or more. It would just last. And I think, for me, I would like to talk to them about maybe something like that to commemorate the passing 100 years. I would really like to see more done about the last World War. I don't think we do as much about the last World War, which was much more horrendous in a way than the First World War. Although, so I mean, I would like to say, well, have we got enough provision to recognise the suffering in the last World War and the loss of lives and the sacrifices that people made there? And that's where I would like to go, to be honest, to try to discuss that with the military to see what we can if we could make a provision in that area.
Okay, thank you. I'm conscious of time. Councillor Jones has suggested he wanted to intervene. Is it relevant at this juncture or no? Okay. Councillor Bidwell and then Councillor Hellier.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a quick nitpick, I think. So I actually asked a question about this particular subject at the July full council meeting, and the written response, part of it suggested that we'd recognised that we could have communicated better on this issue. So I suppose that's part of a response to Councillor London's question there. I think I was just slightly surprised to hear that actually maybe this wasn't further felt by Councillor Mullins a minute ago when the question was asked. So I guess my question is this truly a lesson that's been learned, or was it just sort of something that was kind of said and maybe not felt?
Well, I'm used to things coming through formally to the council, people presenting business cases for this and that, whatever it is they're doing, and for us making agreements with them. Not for renegades to come along and just do what they want, and that's not acceptable. So, we're in that situation with this, and that's why I have no regrets. It wasn't done in the correct way.
Okay, Councillor Hellier.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Mullins, given it's unfortunate where we are now, but given the petition that was raised, when we do decide on what we're going to do and where we're going to do it, could we perhaps recommend that it's done in consultation with the armed forces so that the situation doesn't arise again?
Councillor Mullins.
Absolutely, 100%, 167%, if you like. I mean, I wouldn't dream of doing it any other way. I'm quite happy to meet with them now. And I know it's through the community's portfolio as well, and to sit down and talk anything out with them to see where we can go. I'm more than happy to do that if they're willing to meet with me and we'll talk things through. And well, I wouldn't even dream of not consulting them about what proper future provision in the right place that we could make.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me speak on this item, and thank you to Commission members whose views I've heard, as well as the Cabinet member. I think Councillor Mullins has given a full and honest account of what happened. Indeed, he was in an unenviable position, faced with a mural that had deteriorated in the weather beyond repair. Now, the circumstances on which this mural was put up, never mind how it was removed, were far from ideal. And while Chair, I don't want to relitigate the whole saga all over again, the facts remain that it wasn't given permission to go up and was allowed to stay up for the year of the centenary of the end of the First World War on the clear understanding it was going to be temporary. But that appears to have been forgotten along the way a little too readily. But at the time of its removal, with local government reorganisation beginning, along with the major budget savings being made at the budget, which was impending, officers and cabinet members became immediately, both corporately and in policy terms, involved in an extended set of other activities. Chris will remember that very well, I know I do. Now, if I have a regret, it is looking back on this with hindsight, and hindsight is a marvellous thing. I would have wanted the council to have let some of the local armed forces groups know after it had been removed, rather than have them discover it for themselves. And I don't think Chris and I disagree on that. There was a lot happening at the time, and that could have been picked up sooner. Throughout this, however, I was clear, following the decision being implemented, that we must work going forward with the local armed forces groups to find an alternative that they could be happy with, and that work is still ongoing. But I am pleased in the first instance it's been referred to, a plaque dedicated to those workers at Tilgate Park lost in the First World War is being prepared and installed so that the names are remembered, are not forgotten. These were the only names not covered elsewhere. The others, I'm informed, are present in one shape or form, except for possibly a small number. Just not necessarily in one place, and that's because Crawley itself is a relatively modern construct. Most are recorded within the parish areas that made up the area that covered Crawley over a century ago, long before the advent of the new town. And if viewed through that perspective, their siting is much more logical. I maintain, Councillor Mullins has referred to some of them earlier on, that the council's done some great things with our armed forces locally, and the extent of what we do as a borough council. Armed Forces Day, grants to locals veterans groups, consistently supporting the Crawley Civil Military Partnership. These aren't little things, Chair. It's been referred to that in the last few years, the Veterans Breakfast Clubs in various iterations received grants of just under £2,000. And I believe that some of this money in the former case went towards provision of a new standard for the veterans for formal occasions, which I was very pleased about at the time. But just talking about the budget for Crawley Armed Forces Day and the cost of delivering this year's event, Councillor Mullins mentioned was £2,000. There are a lot of additional hours of officer time that the council puts in, which we are happy to do, I hasten to add, Chair. But again, these hold some considerable value in themselves that, were they to be quantified, would almost certainly exceed this amount. Now, I'm informed that of the major local authorities in West Sussex, only Crawley Borough Council and Horsham District Council directly organise an Armed Forces Day event on an annual basis. Other town councils do so, but they are done at the parish level. However, returning to the issue of an appropriate memorial, we will continue to do things and press ahead with work on something more substantial to commemorate those fallen. But this may be in a more central location to town. That's the thinking at the moment. There still remains, of course, the War Memorial at St John's Church that's been there throughout this whole time, and there are others, as I think have been referred to. If there is additional money to be spent, while I read the demand of the petition, I would rather that any money from this council, however it is currently allocated, was spent directly on paying towards what the new memorial will require to be created. And in terms of my own personal commitment, I would also say it was my motion to full council that successfully got cross-party support back in July 2012 to sign up to our civil military community covenant that Councillor Lanza was talking about with the MOD, to recognise the bravery and commitment of the armed forces, both serving and veteran members and their families. So I'm not someone who's indifferent, and I'm extremely grateful for their service. And I think that the homecoming march that some of the older councillors remember held some time ago, when I think Carol Eade was the mayor, also showed the strength of feeling among local people. So I think we can assure both Commission members and indeed anyone watching this meeting that the council is absolutely looking at this actively and looking at seeing what the best we can do. And officers know that us as councillors and the cabinet really want to get a satisfactory conclusion that everyone can be happy with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, that's been quite a long discussion on that item. I think I'm going to mention something to the meeting now about some actions that I'd taken, and I feel rather deflated saying this. Coming to Crawley 6-7 years ago, I was absolutely delighted to see the work that is done in and around the borough, recognising the armed forces, recognising the veterans. As I said, the background I've got is raising annual events and fundraising, moments of silence and wreath laying. And I was conscious that this council is time limited, and we're doing what I see is a very, very good job in general. And conscious of that, I have actually entered into discussions with council officers about possibly a report of what we do, or possibly a sub-panel. And sadly, I think that things may now get confused, but I can guarantee you that those discussions had been started before I was aware of this petition. I think if it is the agreement of the meeting, I would ask in the first instance possibly for a report from the officers of what it is we do, and then we can reflect as an OSC if we wish to have a sub-panel. I don't think it would take very long. I don't think it would require a great deal of time, but what it would guarantee is that the members of that sub-panel can then have direct discussions themselves with veterans and representatives of the armed forces and make sure that what the outturn is as good as possible. As I say, I'm a bit sad that the two things might now become conflated, because it absolutely was not a reaction. It was discussions I entered almost immediately, having been elected as chair of the OSC. So I think that kind of wraps it up. And would that be of agreement to the meeting that we ask for a report in the first instance that we consider, and then whether, with the fact that the council is likely to disappear, what we can do to ensure that Crawley, in whatever format it may or may not take, can continue to respect and work with those who are currently serving or those who have served in the best way possible. Would that be an agreement? Is that agreed? Okay. Yeah, could you second that? We have a report. Sorry, Councillor Elliott.
Yes, I second that.
Okay. Right, thank you. Right, thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Moving on now to item 6. I'd now like to consider 2026 and 2027 Housing Review Accounts Business Plan, a report from Councillor Jones, Councillor Martlew, Head of Corporate Finance, Caroline Martlew, Head of Corporate Finance, Vicky Basley, on the right one, yep. Okay, and also, can I welcome to the meeting Mr Glenn Smith from Housing Finance Associates, who will provide some slides and talk us through some additional explanation to the report. I would remind the Commission that the focus still needs to be on the report and recommendations. Councillor Jones, are you going to introduce the report before we hand over to the officers and Mr Smith? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, Councillor Irvine would, as a portfolio holder, like to add anything. I'd be more than happy if I've missed anything that he'd like to add. But can I just say, Chair, that in beginning, this is the first item tonight that the Commission is hearing in a very substantial agenda that shows the joined-up thinking and impressive scale of vision we retain as a borough council, as an administration and through our political leadership, even at this late stage in the council's life. We're still excited for Crawley and everything we can do to make things even better for local people, as I hope will be illustrated as we move through the rest of this meeting. The purpose of this report, the HRA business plan has been developed to put sound financial governance around the HRA, ensuring it's both financially robust and strategically aligned to housing priorities. The HRA, for those who don't know what that means, is it's a landlord account that records all the expenditure and income that arises from the provision of a council housing accommodation. It's ring-fenced with rent income as the primary source of income. Therefore, it's important to forecast the long-term financial sustainability of it to deliver the council's priorities with regards to council and affordable homes for Crawley. To undertake the business plan, the council worked with Glenn and Housing Finance Associates, a specialist in HRI business planning, to create a model for Crawley homes. And the baseline scenario draws on information sources that include the current revenue budget, the stock condition investment projections and the updated development programme. The business plan is also modelled on a rent of CPI plus 1% until 2035-36, which gives a baseline provision of the HRA of what affordable is. It should be noted that a rent increase of anything less than this will impact on that affordability. It should also be remembered that rent levels have been suppressed over several years by government-mandated below-inflation rent increases, which were CPI minus 1%. And it should be noted that the original intention of the self-financing system in 2012, which the government forced the council to take on significant debt in return for freedoms to plan and fund housing services and capital investment funded by rents. And the other assumptions in the plan are detailed in the report, Chair. It should be noted that the assumptions for capital spend are subject to a level of uncertainty because the council stock condition data is still to be completed and the survey is due to be completed by the end of December. Borrowing is the main source of capital financing for the development projects. The plan documents the increasing need to borrow for capital and to repay the self-financing loan taken out in 2011-2012. It should be noted that any change in income, costs or assumptions will impact on the affordability of the plan. The baseline position shows the business plan performs well and is affordable throughout the period of the plan. It shows that the HRA, importantly, is able to maintain at least a minimum level of balances, £5 million, throughout the 30-year period. This is extremely welcome and shows that the council's HRA is in relatively good health. The baseline position allows for completion of the existing development programme, which is very important. However, any new schemes would need to be added to the model and would impact on the overall forecast position. But the good news is it's indicating that the projects that we've identified at least look financially very, very, very viable for going ahead. The development programme and the required level of capital investment in the stock will need to be financed by borrowing, which rises and reaches a peak of £665 million in the final year. This is a significant level of debt, which the plan indicates is affordable. However, the level of debt must be kept under review to ensure that it remains affordable. So to reiterate, this plan provides early warnings of risks and opportunities based on what we know at the moment. The decisions made now about rent levels and spend will impact on the affordability of the plan. The plan is still subject to the outcome of the completed stock condition survey, and the plan will inform the 26-27 HRA budget and will be reviewed annually going forward. It is worth saying, however, that the current aspirations that we have would deliver over 540 new council homes, which would be a substantial increase to our stock and will fulfil a great need from residents who have a sufficient local connection under the council's application requirements. It's also worth saying that while some of these debt figures might sound large to Commission members and indeed the public, it needs to be remembered that that figure does not take into account the significant rental income that will be received on the overall stock, made further secure through recent changes to right to buy made by the government, particularly the length of time before the new homes built can be sold. Other changes by the government, including the proportion of sales receipts kept by the council and also the use of one-for-one receipts towards new building, have also been extremely helpful in this regard. Our HRA is largely in the good condition it is today, in my judgment, because we have done the house building in a period when many other, if not most, local authorities weren't. So we can move forward with some confidence, but there will be some dependency on how much decarbonisation and energy efficiency requirements will directly cost the council, as well as the results of the stock condition survey in terms of planned maintenance that might be required. We have delivered, we will continue to deliver, but we will also remain vigilant. And I'm also conscious that our advisors are going to give some technical guidance to the commission now in terms of what is a very technical plan and are far more equipped to talk about it than I am. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Were there any other contributions that wanted to be made before we... Yes, certainly.
Which one is it? Oh, it's that one. I'll be very, very brief, Chair, because Councillor Jones has introduced it far more expertly than I ever could. But I just wanted to say that last year, just after the general election, I attended a meeting in London, a meeting of council leaders and cabinet members for housing and various other people associated with housing. And it was the launch of a report produced by Southwark Borough Council on the future of housing. And in that meeting, it became very apparent that many councils' housing revenue accounts are in a perilous position. They've lost rental income through right to buy and through other means. They've not been able to replace their stock, which means that they have to repair and improve their housing stock in the face of rising costs and falling income. So I'm happy to say that we in Crawley don't face those challenges, not just because the housing revenue account has been well managed, and I thank you officers for that, but because over the last 10 years or so, we have had a programme of building and acquiring new council homes. And the increased rental income means that we have a healthy HRA. My only regret being that I probably won't be here in 30 years to see what happens. So, you know, and
on that cheery note,
that this
Yeah.
council
Yeah.
should give itself a really big pat on the back for the foresight it's had to maintain a house building programme over all these last 10 or so years.
Absolutely. Before we hand over to Glenn Smith, can I thank the officers as well for a very, very useful and pre-meet that we had, and lots of questions were answered there for myself and Councillor Hellier. So, without further ado, over to you, Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go through a set of slides with you which paint quite a lot of detail on the picture that Councillor Jones has just given you. Rather than go through every slide in detail, I think I'll go through and pick up the main messages, but the detail will be in the papers that are circulated to you, and you will recognise some of the slides, some of the charts from the report that accompanies this. Now, the important thing about the preparation of the HRA business plan is that it isn't a competition to get a set of 30-year projections right to the penny. So taking the councillor's comments about seeing how things turn out in 30 years. One of the things I can say absolutely hand on heart is that it won't turn out the way that we've projected it, because things will change in that time. What business planning is, in part, certainly as far as the financial projections are concerned, is an exercise in assessing the risks, managing the risks, and showing you what the future looks like if nothing changes. Because if you know how things look, if you're stood on the prow of a ship and your radar is telling you that there's an iceberg ahead, well, you can steer to avoid it. And that's what we're trying to do with these 30-year projections, to show you where the risks and opportunities may be, and so that the council can then take decisions to make sure that it optimises the opportunities and avoids or manages the risks. Now, when we make these projections, we start with the best available evidence base, and that is almost entirely evidence and information that's provided by the council. So we use your budgets, we use your data on the condition of the stock and the investment requirements of the stock. We use your current development programme, and we supplement that with information that we can get from reliable sources like the Bank of England that tells us what the inflation projections may be. And we work with quite a few authorities, so we can bring intelligence from working with those other authorities that help in the earlier discussion and help to shape the assumptions that feed in. And ultimately, it is about providing that early warning, telling us what happens if nothing changes, what happens what are the risks and opportunities based on what we know now and what we can reasonably expect to happen. I'm going to skip through the next few slides, but we can come back to the detail if you would like to explore any of them further. And I want to show you what the charts themselves look like. And we've got a set of slides here that show different perspectives on the health of the housing revenue account. On this chart, on the left-hand side, we can see a 30-year projection of the capital programme, and each of the different colours is a different type of expenditure. that the HRA may be managing. And from the bottom up, this amber colour is the major works. So this is component replacements, doors, windows, kitchens, bathrooms, and the like. We have a pink area here, which is decarbonisation spend, so energy efficiency works. We also have a blue, a red, and a purple band there, which are different smaller parts of the programme, disabled adaptations, compliance works, and some other types of spending that are not necessarily stock related. And then over on the left-hand side here, we've got this brown area, which is the current development programme, which is delivering 542 homes in the projections that we can see right now. Now, it's one thing to look at the cost of that programme. So on the right and on the right-hand side, we have exactly the same spend profile, but instead of cost, each of the colours here show how the council will pay for that investment. And again, working from the bottom up, we have the use of the Major Repairs Reserve, which is an internal resource generated by the HRA itself. It's recycled depreciation charges. We also have here a blue wedge, which is use of revenue contributions, another self-financed source that's used for the capital programme. We have the pink area, which is retained right to buy receipts. That's a very specific type of right to buy receipt that can only be spent on new homes. We've got some use of grant, some use of Section 106 funding, which is the little yellow stretch here. And we've got some other use of capital receipts throughout, which are other types of right to buy receipt other than the retained receipt. But the important thing to note about this chart is the bulk of it is green. And green is borrowing. And of the different types of finance that are available to the council, borrowing is the one that costs it money because the HRA has to pay interest on what it borrows. Now, one of the things we tell the projections to do is to repay debt when it can afford to do so. And the next two charts show us, first of all, on the left-hand side, the resulting debt curve. So this is the way that debt increases all the way through the 30-year period. We can see that it increases more quickly in the first few years. That's because we are spending on borrowing to deliver new homes. It then eases off a little bit, but it continues to rise all the way through. So what this is telling us is that the authorities need to invest, as we've assessed it and as we've modelled it, is such that it needs to continue borrowing, and there is some risk associated with that. The debt does rise all the way through. It's still rising at the end of the period, and that brings with it a cost, which we'll have a look at in a moment or two. The chart on the right-hand side shows the housing revenue account revenue balance. Now, the reason that we monitor this is that it would be unlawful for the council to budget for a balance that is negative. Now, we're not budgeting at the moment. We're making 30-year projections. But if this were to start turning downwards, it would be telling us that something is wrong financially with the modelling that we're producing. But as you can see, the council is able to broadly maintain a balance of £5 million all the way through, which is what we're aiming to do. It means that it's maximising its use of those resources, it's repaying debt when it can afford to do so, and it's borrowing when it needs to. Now, the next two charts give us a view of the affordability of that debt. The one on the left measures something called interest cover, and interest cover takes the surplus that the HRA generates, so the income from rents primarily, minus the cost of managing and maintaining the stock and the cost of depreciation, and compares that surplus with the amount that it needs to pay on interest for the loans that it needs to borrow. And we have two lines on this chart. The pink line at the bottom shows a minimum level of 125%. Now, if the council is performing at that level, it means that its surplus is enough to pay for the interest charge and have an extra quarter, another 25% on top of that. And it's the kind of calculation that a bank might make when it's considering whether to lend a mortgage to somebody. It's a real practical indicator of affordability. We can see that the council performs really well. It's significantly materially above that minimum level all the way through, although the performance is starting to tail off as we go through the years, and that's because when we get to 2035-36, we get to the end of the CPI plus 1% rent increase assumption, and costs start to rise more quickly than rents. Now, the chart on the right-hand side shows us the operating margin. So this is the percentage of rent that is left over after paying for management, maintenance and depreciation charges. And this is actually performing at quite a good level. Typically see authorities performing at much lower levels, 15% or so, sometimes lower, sometimes higher. This is at a very high level. It's very good. It's an indicator that the rents that you're generating are a strong rental stream, and that the authority is managing its costs very well in connection with those. And that's putting it in that strong position that allows it to borrow at that increasing level and still be able to afford that level of debt all the way through the 30-year period. Now, the summary on the baseline is that this is an affordable position. You have an ambitious development programme, which is included within this. The levels of stock investment that we've included are representative levels of stock investment, so we don't think that there are any overly optimistic key assumptions going in there. But the thing to note is that borrowing rises throughout, and that's what's driving the operating margin. And the operating margin improves as rents rise, which means that the affordability rises. But it's in decline over the long term, because when we get past 2035, 36, costs rise more quickly than rents, and that starts to eat away at that affordability. And that mechanism is important, because anything within the assumptions that we've used to prepare these presentations can change. The level of income can change, the level of cost can change, the level of investment can change, policy can change, and can impact on all of these things. So it's important to remember that when costs increase, if you don't have funding to go with those costs, then that affordability line, the green line, goes down. If income is foregone, or if it is lost, if it's not maximised, then that green line goes down. So what the authority needs to continue to focus on, it's obviously doing this very well at the moment anyway, but it needs to focus on making sure that it minimises its cost, maximises its income, and tries to keep that debt as low as it can, because that's the way that it can afford to do more. Now, I've gone through these charts in a bit more detail. I'm going to skip through the next few, because what they show us are some alternative scenarios that we've presented just to illustrate how different assumptions can impact on that bottom line. But we did look at what happens if the council were to spend less on decarbonisation, what would happen if the council implements rent convergence, which is a policy that the government are consulting on for implementation from April next year. What happens if the council were to decide not to increase rents next year? I'm not saying that it would, but it's a decision that the council might consider. And then we've also got 3 scenarios we've looked at for development as well. But in terms of these 3, if we look at the affordability chart, we can see that as soon as we start to add cost in, which is what we do when we freeze rents. So actually, I say add costs in. We're taking income out. If the council were to freeze rents in just 1 year, we can see that the affordability drops quite considerably. And by the end of the period, it's crossing that minimum line. So that one decision can have quite a significant impact on the results. On the other hand, if we look at implementing rent convergence, which generates more rent, we can see affordability goes up, so the council could do more. And if it spends less on decarbonisation, then it goes up yet again. It may not have the choice to do that, but this is we're playing what if here. These are not suggestions for policy; they're illustrations. And then we looked at the impact of building new homes. And typically building new homes will improve affordability for us, as long as the council can generate more rent than it costs all the way through. So our conclusion then is that the authority needs to make some choices when it looks at what it does within its HRA, because unfunded revenue growth has a negative impact, but anything which generates additional income or additional funding has a positive impact. And that leads us to this chart, which is talking about the kinds of trade-off, the kind of strategic decision that an authority needs to be considering. And universally, authorities are having to decide whether to focus on development, stock investment or decarbonisation, and to prioritise between all of those, because it's generally not possible to do all three of them. There's a limit to the resource that's available to the HRA, and it needs to be spent strategically. The name of the game really is to optimise your revenue position, to maximise your rents, minimise your costs, because that actually gives you more capital capacity, because you can repay debt and then re-borrow to do other things. And I'm going to leave you just with these key messages. The authority is in, I think, a very strong looking position as far as its HRA projections are concerned. Its long-term performance, though, will be impacted on the level of borrowing that it needs. So it is important to make strategic decisions about how the authority invests in its next steps, what it builds, how it updates its stock, and so on. There are actions the authority can do to improve matters. It could look at how it might reduce costs, or it might adjust its rent policy. I think if it were to do that, then it needs a medium-term plan to do so, to make sure that the actions required are delivered. But at the moment, the business plan is looking good. It is looking strong. But as ever, it's in a position where you could potentially improve things.
Thank you very much indeed. I'll now open it up to questions or discussion. So do councillors have any questions they wish to raise, or any issues they wish to raise? Councillor Hellier.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for the presentation. I did raise this at a pre-meeting that we had, because I've got a banking background. So it would be typical, if a bank was lending this money, to actually put a covenant in on interest cover at 2 times as opposed to 1.25 times. You know, I think it would be useful to everybody to understand how that correlates in this scenario, but also in relation to covenants where we've got rent coming in and we've actually got the borrowing there. Is that match funded at all? Just to explain a little bit more.
Match funding of the borrowing, yes. Well, what we've shown in the financing chart, one of the first charts that we looked at around the capital programme, was the other types of finance that the authority is putting in, and the majority of that, the non-borrowing finance, is self-financed by the HRA. So the HRA is contributing depreciation monies and also other revenue surplus into the capital programme. What it's also trying to do is to manage that debt position as best it can as well. In terms of the interest cover requirement, 1.25% has in the past been fairly typical of what banks would ask a new housing association to provide. The authority itself doesn't need to provide covenants, because it has a different statutory position, and it has a different relationship with banks and so on as well. But that 125% is based on what typically happens with housing associations.
Councillor London.
Thank you. Lots of questions sort of spring to mind from this. I guess I'll start with what is the council's housing association element-based capital assets considered at the moment, and what I'm trying to compare that against is £660 million of debt in the future, and roughly what's the ratio of debt to asset that we hold? Just to take this back to basic sort of household finance, the mortgage ratio in effect of what we're talking about borrowing. Secondly, I guess I'd want to understand, we've obviously done quite well to reduce our overall debt of the Housing Revenue Association from 200, I think it was 260 to 224 in the report, but we're now talking about that debt increasing quite significantly over a number of years, and this isn't necessarily a question for you, it might be a question for Ian or someone else. What really is driving that change in direction of debt falling to debt rising? What I can see maybe on graph at 4.23 is that our major work spending is starting to increase quite significantly. What do we why is, I guess my question is, why is that looking to be increased under this current HOA capital programme? And I guess also, I mean, my gut feeling is this the same like, to my mind, we're just seeing debt going up and up and up. You know, if I was choosing to invest personally my money in this, I would think, well, past 30 years, we might be struggling to be making sort of, for want of a better term, a profit. I'm not saying that's the purpose of the HRA, it obviously isn't, but understanding it from a business case point of view. So we're obviously looking at our debts going up continuously, and we're in a relatively strong position from what you say. Do housing associations also have similar sort of charts showing that their debt's only going to go up over the next 30 years? I'm just interested to know why we think ours is, in considering we think we're in a strong position, we still think our debt's going to go up significantly, effectively almost double, near enough, over the next 30 years. And the only change in that's material, for want of a better term, is the initial new build and 1-for-1 replacements over the next 5 years. So if everybody's struggling with spending a lot more on major works and not bringing enough money to cover those costs, is the whole public housing sector facing a sort of bit of a crisis, I guess is a question. Quite a big question.
I think there was 2 or 3 in there. Do you want to?
Let's make a start. In terms of the need to borrow, it is primarily to deliver that stock investment over the 30-year period. One of the things that we've seen over recent years is that, first of all, the requirements to invest have changed. The expectations to make sure that homes are to the required quality have increased. Public perceptions have shifted with that as well, and also the costs of providing that work have really risen very substantially. In the years following COVID, they went up by 20-odd% in a year, so there was a very substantial increase in the cost of doing those works, and that's what's driving the core of that borrowing higher. In terms of the behaviour of the curve, housing associations are a different kind of beast, and they have a different kind of borrowing. What I would expect a housing association to be able to show would be a curve that is coming down towards the end, with an action plan to deliver that. Now, that is an action plan that the authority itself could seek to deliver as well, but it requires that medium-term view. It requires looking at costs and income in a structured way to try and bring things down as well. And I'm working with some authorities where that debt is starting to come down. When we look at Crawley as a particular example, though, it can afford to cover a larger level of debt than it's holding at the moment. So the pressure isn't as immediate as we're seeing in some other places. But you're right. If we were to look at this over 40 or 50 years, then we would be wanting that debt curve to start to come down.
Is that okay?
There's just one about what's our actual rough estimate for Crawley Homes assets compared to our borrowing. And then, I mean, only to otherwise comment and say thank you very much both for the answers and for the report in general. It's good that we've got this to give us that ability to make a strategic decision on our spending. So thank you to the officers and the sort of external officer for the report and this thing. It does really obviously help us in making those. So thank you for this report. And obviously, as we said, in the short term, we're looking pretty healthy, especially compared to other authorities. So that's excellent.
Okay.
We have a figure for you.
Did you want to add something back? Yeah.
Yes, just say our balance sheet at 31st of March 25, the value of our council dwellings is 832 million, but that is valued at social housing value, which is 33% of market value. So that one.
And also, presumably, that would increase over. Just for clarity, that would increase over the 30 years. One might reasonably assume that would increase over the 30 years, the value of that stock. Yeah. Okay, that's it. That's me done. Thank you.
So was there an additional comment there? And then Councillor Jones.
Sorry, Chair. And you'll have the additional units?
So the volume and increases and the assets themselves increase in value. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I will cover the political commentary because the officers can't. But, you know, we do have to take increased debt pressures seriously, absolutely. But our advisors are clearly telling us it is affordable and we are handling this well. Hopefully I'm not putting words in Glenn's mouth there. But and we also have to remember, ultimately, we still have a housing emergency. That can't be forgotten, and this council won't. House building is expensive. There's no avoiding that. But with that also comes the increased rental income. With, I think, important as well, the changes that the government have made recently, more security that won't be eroded over time in quite the way that we've been faced with in recent decades. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for a very comprehensive report. Just three questions. The first one, what is the effect of right to buy on the stocks and our income moving forward in this 30-year plan? Because obviously if people are purchasing the properties, obviously that's taking some stock away from us. So the effects of the stock and the income are going from us. What grants are available, are you aware, may be available for us for decarbonisation? Because obviously that's a massive thing the government's pushing as well. And with future interest rates, your charts, what are they sort of rates are they based on? Obviously interest rates are, you know, it's hard to really predict going forward because inflation needs to be contained, and obviously if inflation keeps going up, then at some point we might have to make some tough decisions there. So what predictions have we made with the interest rates? Thank you.
I'll start with the interest rates. You're quite right. One of the things that changes very significantly if we remodel the projections is what happens if we change the interest rates. Now, we haven't shown this in the presentation, but as part of the work in preparing this, we've had a look at a range of different rates, higher rates and lower rates, and they broadly result in the kinds of behaviour that we've shown in the scenarios, rather than extend the presentation further with another set of charts. I haven't got the figure at the moment, but I will double check once I've sort of gone through your other questions. Decarbonisation grant, we have at the moment allowed for grant that we're aware of, that the council is gaining. We haven't made any assumptions about future grant rates. In part, that's because the government policy isn't clear on it, and we need a little bit more certainty before we start to count something that we can't rely on. So we try and take a prudent view on that. Any grant that the authority was able to generate, or indeed if it was able to work with private sector partners as a way of sharing cost with other organisations, would help to improve the position slightly longer. And I can't remember what the third question was.
Right to buy.
Right to buy numbers, yes. What we're expecting, thank you, is that right to buy numbers will drop to a very low level because of the changes that were introduced in November last year. Now, the level of receipt that is generated will be more completely usable by the authority than has previously been the case up until the end of this year. So the receipts that it can use to finance its capital programme, there will be more of them, will be more usable, but there will be fewer of them. And actually, as an income source or as a funding source, it will reduce rather than increase. The income that the council continues to generate from the properties that it doesn't sell will help it to manage borrowing going forward. So it's if you take the two positions side by side, there isn't very much between them, between the old rules on right to buy and selling more homes, and retaining those homes and selling fewer.
Is that okay?
Just the interest rate prediction that we used, if you know that figure.
That's something possibly, if you got it there now.
Yes, we're using forward projections of 4.5% for this year, dropping over the next few years to about 4%.
Okay. Right. Any other questions from anyone? So all members have had the opportunity to speak. So I would absolutely thank the officers and Glenn for a really, what feels a robust report. And as Councillor Irvine said, really, really good news as well, that we're doing so well with the housing revenue account and the possibilities of these over 540 new homes. It's absolutely brilliant. So I move that the Commission notes the report and request the views that we've expressed here in the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. And I'd ask the Vice Chair to second that. Is that agreed? Sorry.
Yes, I second that.
Okay. Is that agreed, everyone? Okay, brilliant. So the recommendations are agreed. And can I thank Mr Smith, Glenn, for attending tonight's meeting, and you are welcome to leave the building as we discussed before, down the Town Hall exit, and there's the green buttons on the way out. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, moving on. We move on to the budget strategy 2026, 27, 28, 29 from Councillor Jones, Carolyn and Vicky. Due to issues of the auto numbering and minor errors, there is a supplementary agenda, which I think, does that come out today? Yeah, yep. Which includes a revised copy of the report in Appendix A, which may have been subsequently corrected, but there's been no key changes to recommendations or reasons. I think there was some, Councillor Heller, you picked up on one or two little issues. Councillor Jones, can you please introduce the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The Council has a statutory responsibility to set a budget and council tax in advance of the commencement of the new financial year. This report sets out the budget strategy for the period from 26-27 to 27-28 due to the abolition of Crawley Borough Council from the 1st of April 2028 as a result of local government reorganisation. It addresses high levels of uncertainty in government funding due to the Fair Funding Review 2.0, inflation and rising service demands, especially homelessness. The Council awaits the provisional local government finance settlement due in mid-December 2025 for its grant allocation. Whilst the report is based on the latest information and best estimates budget, forecasting is inevitably volatile and subject to change. The uncertainty and pressures are detailed in the report, along with the assumptions that will set the budget parameters for 26-27. The Council's finances started to come under pressure in 2023-24, requiring in-year savings and adjustments to be made. And the outturn for 24-25 was favourable due to that robust budget and reserve management. The 25-26 budget was also favourable, allowing a budgeted contribution to reserves of 88,000. However, as reported in Q1, an overspend of 326,000 is reported for 25-26. So given all the pressures, Chair, we begin from a solid position due to the huge amount of work that was done on the budget last year. This has undoubtedly allowed us to approach what needs to be done this year from a better point. In terms of the medium-term financial strategy, this is a strategic framework that outlines the Council's financial planning over the medium term, bringing together all the known factors and key assumptions affecting the Council's financial position. Those assumptions are detailed throughout the report. However, most of the assumptions or funding have been challenging to forecast. The government's also announced its intentions to reform local authority funding from 26-27 onwards, whilst providing increased certainty through a 3-year settlement. The reforms will impact both the funding distributed according to need through a relative needs formula and funding received through the business rate retention scheme. Now, early indications show that the Council will gain from the relative needs formula. However, the level of funding that the Council will receive will not be known until that we receive the settlement in December 2025. This is later than originally advised, although it feels familiar to me that we don't know till Christmas. And as the Council has experienced in the past, the devil's often in the detail, which is not always immediately available. To try and assess the funding allocation expected, the Council works with the two leading advisors in local government funding, Pixel and LG Futures. However, as their forecasts both differ widely, we've also taken a third methodology which has been modelled as a sort of cash flat scenario. So looking at the three methodologies, if Pixel Finance is correct, we would have a surplus of 711,000 in the 26-27 financial year. However, if the LG Futures prediction is accurate, we would have a deficit of 3.536 million. As people can understand, that that's a larger variance than most accountants would feel comfortable with. We've also got a cash flat prediction which tries to sort of square what might be an optimistic and a pessimistic scenario, and that still gives the council a deficit of 2.439 million. It should also be noticed there is still some uncertainty over the Home Office new burdens funding in the region of £2 million, which poses a significant risk across all the scenarios. Officers and myself, Chair, I can assure you, have been working hard to try and get clarity on this for some time, but up until now, without success. In terms of reserves, the reserves management will continue, including identifying any reserves that may be used to support a potentially worsening financial situation in the current and future years, if necessary. However, as always, the use of reserves is only a short-term solution and not sustainable, especially as the general fund balance forecast would fall below the recommended 3 million minimum in 26-27 if the most pessimistic methodologies prove to be correct. Our capital strategy, just to address that for a moment, the focus on maintaining assets and environmental obligations as well as spend to save projects, but not preclude those that deliver social value. Borrowing is likely given the size of the programme, but must be avoided where at all possible due to the revenue implications, because we have to pay interest back out of revenue and not capital. In terms of flexible use of capital receipts strategy, our capital receipts can only be used for specific purposes, mainly to fund capital expenditure. However, there is time-limited flexibility to use capital to fund revenue costs of capital reform. That's all laid out in Appendix C. Full Council is requested to approve the strategy as it will allow the application of capital receipts to support any service reductions that are approved for 25-26. In terms of a saving strategy, we nevertheless we intend to develop plans in this interim period. It's not prudent for the council to wait for the announcement of the provisional settlement in mid-December to start planning for any base budget savings. There wouldn't be adequate time to do that in a way that would be satisfactory. So the short-term horizon, dictated by local government reform, limits long-term savings initiatives and therefore has an impact on the saving strategy. It is therefore recommended that we continue with a phased approach to closing any potential budget gap, which would mean this year identifying £1.5 million of savings for the 26-27 budget based on the cash flat budget scenario, and to balance the budget through the planned use of reserves if required. Chair, I would dearly love, for example, the Pixel finance projections to be proved correct, as would they, I suspect, but we cannot be sure for now. As leader of this council, I've always kept a firm hand on spending and affordability, and that will continue. And we will take proportionate measures to ensure that as much as possible, the council remains solvent and prioritises our communities and their services. Later, we'll be discussing the corporate plan. We'll be speaking more about what that will look like. But I think the Commission can take my assurances that we will remain vigilant and prudence will remain our principle on this. So to reiterate, in summary, there are high levels of uncertainty. So the estimates in the strategy are likely to change, I would like to be more specific now, Chair, but the detailed funding allocations won't be confirmed until the provisional settlement just before Christmas, which will follow the autumn budget on the 26th of November, where we might get some indications, but the detailed stuff will still come forward at the end of the year. Happy, I'm sure, to answer as many questions on this as we can. Thank you.
I can see Councillor Lanza champing at the bit, and Councillor Lunnan. Can I just again thank the officers for a very useful and robust pre-meeting discussion as well, where we covered quite a few issues. Councillor Lanza and then Councillor Lunnan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the leader and officers for that report. I very much appreciate the extreme difficulty under which it's being prepared. There's so many variables out there: devolution, local government reorganisation, uncertainty about government funding streams, and also the wild variation of outcomes between different methodologies. There's a flat cash, there's pixel funding methodology, and the RG Futures methodology. So it is extremely difficult to offer a reliable prediction on the revenue budget in particular. And so I think in broad terms, in calculating a likely revenue outcome and a likely reserves outcome, it is indeed prudent to prepare for one of the worst scenarios while hoping and lobbying for one of the best scenarios. I think that's the kind of approach I would seek to take myself. I did want to draw out a distinction between two of the items that Leader mentioned. I'm not sure if it was fully apparent, but if you go to page 22 and paragraph 6.3, we see budget projections, and I'll go to the year 2027-28 because that's the last year of operation, last financial year of operation of Crawley Borough Council, where you have a budget gap of between 764,000 and 6 million. I mean, it's important to, the magnitude is huge there, isn't it? So I think the flat cash assumption is a reasonable one to run with. But I wanted to draw out the distinction on that between that table, which is the actual revenue outturn, and the data on page 25. I'm not sure it would necessarily have come across in earlier remarks, but if we go to page 26, the top table, and the Leader mentioned a position of 2.439 million for the financial year 2026-27, but of course that's really about the transfer from reserves in that year potentially. I think what's important about both of these tables, and I think the OSC should be acutely interested in this, is how well we are prepared financially for the handover to the new unitary authority. Now, it might be that we need some additional reporting as an OSC as we progress towards that handover. So, and I think the Leader alluded to it as well in an earlier remarks, that we're still working hard as a council to do the best job we can, regardless of local government reorganisation and devolution. And part of that, I think, is close scrutiny by the OSC of the financial preparedness for the transition to the new unitary authority, whatever form it takes. Another observation I'd make, and it's on Appendix C, which is the flexible use of capital receipts. I welcome the strategy for this, for the flexible use of capital receipts. I'm bound to recall that some months ago now, I did ask a question at this committee as to what extent, in the manner of other councils, we could use capital receipts for revenue purposes. And I think the answer at that time, which I understood, was broadly that there would be some risk attached to that because it would reduce investment income at a time when investment income was critical to achieving balanced budgets. So I would assume, and this is partly a question, that when we talk about the flexible use of capital receipts, which is the use of capital, this capital for transformation type projects which generate revenue benefits, I would assume that those projects would only be going ahead if the likely revenue savings exceeded the loss of interest had the money been kept under Treasury management. Thank you.
Two or three issues in there. I don't know who wants to take them.
Yeah. Yes. The use of the flexible capital receipts would, I mean, obviously, yes, it would result in less. I mean, any spend will result in less interest. If that answers the question, because what will actually happen, and this is quite sort of technical, at the end of the financial year, we sit down as finance and we decide what is optimal to the council. So those decisions are made in sort of logical order. when you start financing your capital, you start off with grants, which are specific, then you use capital receipts, and then your sort of last thing is borrowing, because, as Glenn said, it incurs interest. So if you're then using capital to finance revenue, it's the same principle. It would just increase your capital expenditure. Sorry if it's a bit of a techie answer.
Are you okay with that, Councillor Lanza?
Thank you, Chair. It is quite technical. It's just let me put it another way. I mean, if you spend 10 million on a capital project and it's earning 5%, if it was just kind of sitting there, then presumably we would want to ensure that the return on that £10 million was greater in a transformation project than it would be if it was just hanging around.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, I mean, any transformation project has got to pay back, including notional interest.
Sorry, it's essentially the lost cost of having it available for earning interest. Councillor Jones?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. There were a few points there, and I think Councillor Lanza's right. There are a lot of moving parts at the moment, and I'm also very pleased that he approves of the approach that's been taken. I'll take that as a vote of confidence. But aside from the technical questions, in terms of a handover to any new authority, obviously we will be following that closely, and I will ask officers to consider what additional information would be useful for the Commission during this process. I think that's something we can look into. I don't want to make any cast iron promises as what we definitely will, because no doubt that will be brought back to be reminded of if I did. But in terms of our capital money, I mean, our options will be limited if money is needed, and that's capital is only really the place we have to take it from, if that's without cutting services. And obviously, if we have less capital, there will be less interest to be derived from it. Obviously, that's. But I mean, what I won't do and I can't do is dismiss the social value that we'll get on some of our capital spending if we need to do it. If we derive less interest, that's an unfortunate. That will be unfortunate. But we won't resile from the. If that's the right word, from the capital spending we need to do if it is needed and it is affordable.
Before I go to Councillor Lunnon, could I just check something from my own understanding as well? We talk about capital receipts. Are we actually looking at receipts of money that come in from the sale of assets, potentially? I won't ask for a list of what those assets might be, because obviously that's we wouldn't know at this point. But
yeah, we'd be getting into Part B, I think, quite quickly if we did, Chair. But we are in a position where the council is considering some disposals which would return, have a return in capital receipts. Which, but clearly, when we do that, it is discussed under Part B business at this council, or it's done under other delegated routes.
And as it says in Appendix C, we are looking at a time-limited flexibility on the use of those. Councillor Lunnon, you had some questions. Sorry.
Sorry, it's been a while. Yeah, I mean, broadly, I welcome the report. I think cutting through it, what I get to is that if we follow the cash flat scenario, which I think is probably the best scenario to follow at the moment because it sits in the middle of the two other scenarios and it's not the worst presumption, and assuming we do continue to get the new burdens funding, which obviously we might not, we broadly come out at a shortfall of 2.4 million compared to the previous year. So we're going to have to make that, I assume the strategies will roughly be based around how do we make that up. I mean, I don't even know how you begin to make up a shortfall of 5.5 million. That's really quite structural at that point. So, you know, I guess the other questions relate to, I do remember at some point us being told, and it's been the last few years maybe, that at some point we might get a 3-year settlement. Now, obviously, for the purpose of this council, getting a 3-year settlement seems irrelevant now anyway, because the 3rd year will be 0. But I just wonder where we are with getting sort of advanced settlements and not having to wait. You know, setting a budget strategy in the next few weeks seems a bit daft when we have such key numbers unavailable to us. It's a shame we can't set our whole budget process back a bit and actually set a strategy once we understand it and then come to a balanced budget. But we apparently need to set this budget strategy now, so let's do that. I think the strategy written up is perfectly good. The only other bit I had is touching on local government reorganisation. There's no mention in here of additional costs from local government reorganisation. And I do wonder, do we think we know the government won't pay for any of those additional costs, but do we think there will be any additional costs due to local government reorganisation to this council? And if so, where might they come from, and what might we do about putting them into our strategy?
Okay.
I'll start, and I think Ian can finish. So yes, I can confirm that the council will receive a 3-year settlement in December, which will add certainty to the level of government funding. However, whether this is sufficient to protect services is uncertain. So we've sort of gone from certain to uncertain in one sentence. And I won't apologise for that. That is just the way it is. I mean, initially we were promised the settlement at the end of November. That's covered in the report. That's not going to happen because of the way the budget, the timing of the budget, and then it takes at least a couple of weeks to work that through into all the business rates. Now, as for the funding of local government reorganisation, I'll let Ian take that one, please.
A good question, not necessarily a good answer. I mean, still under discussion. There's a number of routes. I think if I recall correctly from the business plan on which all the council submissions across West Sussex were based, we had 2 scenarios, one with a cost of 40 million, one with a cost of around 60 million, give or take. So it's significant. I think government has been clear to date that it expects that to be self-financing through the savings that are made. So that kind of gives you 3 broad strategies. One is that becomes something that is taken on by the new unitaries and the savings pay for it in the longer term. You can go the other way where some of that, because not all of that will be in our period, I think it's a lot lower actually, I think it's about 24 million, something like that, that there's contributions from the councils going through if you don't want to put that debt over, or there are 1 or 2 other things that we can bring into play. So that's currently part of the discussion and not included in the budget strategy as it currently stands. I think ideally, given the challenges that we face in other councils, I don't think we're looking to incorporate something within our budgets moving forward if it can be kind of avoided.
Thank you for that. And that all makes sense. I guess my question would be, should it not be, that statement not be put in the budget strategy to highlight that this might be a significant cost coming forward that we're trying to not include in our budgeting, but nevertheless have to be aware of the possibility of it being included, just in the same way that new burdens funding might be withdrawn?
It's difficult at the moment because final decision has not been taken on which of the ones that we're kind of going forward with, and we're waiting for that. So I think, you know, certainly probably be represented in the next budget strategy that we undertake, although that will only be for 1 year. And I'll just come back to the way I ended it. I think the way that we are looking to shape it is recognising some of the constraints are coming. We're looking at some of the other routes rather than out of this. So it was safer to keep it out for now, but I'd take the point. It may need to come back in the future once it's a bit clearer.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Can I just add, we're hopeful it won't all fall on our shoulders, but that's yet to be determined. But also, Councillor Lunn sort of asked, well, if we have the worst case scenario, what happens? And I think he rightly alludes to the fact that if it is the worst case scenario, then there is a sectoral problem. So Crawley will not be alone by any measure of the imagination. There will be something that is systematic throughout most of local government, I think, at that point. But it's difficult to. I think it's not helpful to speculate until we get a bit more certainty on some of the figures, and we won't get that till near the end of the year.
Okay, are there any other questions, or are we able to think about moving on? I think it's come out very clearly that the OSC is aware of the extraordinary number of variables that are going on here while you're trying to produce a budget. It did occur to me it was a bit like playing Bob Monkhouse's Golden Shot whilst blindfolded with the TV off and the board moving, but give me age away there. Anyway, okay, all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, so I'd like to thank the officers for an interesting for the report. It's definitely an interesting report. I move that the Commission notes the report and request the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet. And I would ask the Vice Chair to second that, please.
Yes, I second that.
Okay, is that agreed? Okay, thank you. Recommendations agreed. Okay, we'll move on now to the corporate plan and a report from Councillor Jones, and I believe Chris Page will be speaking on this one as well. Thank you. We'll just give colleagues a moment to head away. Okay, and Councillor Jones, can you introduce the report, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have great pleasure in presenting to the Commission our corporate plan. The Council does have a corporate plan which was due to take us to 2027, and we are delivering the priorities which were set out in this plan. But since then, the landscape has changed, which means we need to refresh and renew our plan. So local government reorganisation means that CBC will cease to exist and the powers and responsibilities of the council will be transferred to a new council. But before that happens, we want to ensure that the council remains focused on delivering for local people and Crawley. So while local government reorganisation will put additional strain on the council's already strained resources, we still have a job to do for local people, and we absolutely recognise that. This plan is therefore setting our priorities until a new council is vested. It gives clear direction to officers about the work that needs to be done and the issues that the council wants to prioritise. It will ensure that we remain focused on delivering, something which is always important, but even more so with LGR in the background. The second change is our corporate peer challenge. In the action plan we published after the CPC, we committed to producing a new corporate plan and would also bring forward performance measures to increase transparency and ensure that local people can see the work that we're doing for them and with them every day. So if full council agree this plan, we will then bring forward measures and report on these to both OSC and Cabinet to show our progress on delivering the plan. Now, just to address the key features, we cannot do everything in the time we have left as much as we would like to, although we will try to do our best to do as much as we can. And we have to make choices about the key areas that we'll prioritise and the outcomes that we want to see. And in this plan, we focus on 5 areas which we believe tackle the biggest challenges that the town faces, as well as improving the town, its services and facilities, so that everyone who lives, works or has fun here can get the very best from Crawley. So these areas are to create a thriving local economy with green jobs, tackling the housing emergency, ensuring that Crawley is a vibrant town with high quality facilities, to build connected and thriving communities, and to prepare Crawley for the future. In addition, we make 5 key commitments to Crawley: that we will develop and implement a new economic and place-making vision that maximises the opportunities to develop Crawley's vibrant economy. We will work with Network Rail and West Sussex County Council to deliver improvements to Three Bridges Station. We will get major new housing projects underway for Crawley residents and develop a pipeline for new homes in the future to tackle the housing emergency. we have spoken, Chair, a lot more about this in the previous item, but over 540 units either delivered or under construction by the end of this council is an ambitious target for a council of our size, but one we feel a high level of confidence that we can make deliverable, provided all the conditions are met, some of which are dependent on third parties. Fourthly, we will create a lasting legacy for the borough and its residents by transforming Goffs Park in the heart of the town, and we will create a new town council. We will protect and champion the new town offer for residents. In a time of uncertainty, our corporate plan sets out our clear direction to continue delivering for Crawley, to ensure that the council is focused on local priorities and that Crawley is in the best place for the future when a new council starts the next chapter of our town story. More than happy to answer questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Chris, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Thank you, Chair. No, I think the leaders set that out. The only thing I'd say is just to reiterate a point the leader made, which is that quite a lot of the recommendations that came out of the Corporate Peer Challenge rely on us improving the corporate plan in order to deliver those recommendations. So previously, OSC and Cabinet and full council have considered that action plan. So this will help implement some of those changes. But I think, yes, the point that the leader made, but just to reiterate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the report. I've got a couple of comments that I'll make, but I'll open it to other colleagues first. So are there questions that councillors wish to raise? Councillor Lunnan, Councillor Lanza.
Well, I mean, I welcome the report. I think it's a really good summary of where we are as a council and what our focus is going forward. I especially like that we are so specific on what the strategic priorities are. I think it makes, sometimes when you read corporate plans, they can be very wishy-washy as to what's actually going to be delivered against what's being said. I think the clear strategic priority, the 5 priority programmes are explicit, and I welcome that. And I don't want to go on too long because we've been going on quite a long time tonight, but I just thank the leader for the report and hope we can deliver these in the 2 years that we've got left. So thank you.
I would just add at this moment, when I did my pre-meet notes, the first thing I wrote down was that it was a set of good and powerful statements with very clear ideas throughout, which is sort of essentially what you said, and I shared that with officers. Councillor Lanza.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think it is good to have ambition, which extends quite a lot beyond the mere process, if I can put it that way, of handing over to unitary authority in 2028. I think that's really important. I heard what the leader said in terms of a strategic priority being a town council in the singular, and that's reflected also on page 60, which gives the priority town council, create a town council which will protect the champion the new town for the residents of Crawley. I also note what Councillor Lunnan said, which I think was significant for reasons I'll give in a moment. This corporate plan looks ahead to the year 2028. Briefly, on the subject of the town council, I want to look forward 1 week to the 13th of October, when we have a meeting of the Governance Committee chaired by Councillor Lunnan. And at that meeting, we're invited really in part a response to a full council resolution, which was to investigate, to launch, as it were, a community governance review. And I refer to that report now, which we'll be discussing next Monday. 5.2, paragraph 5.2, and I'll read it because you won't have it in front of you. The community governance review will also invite any comments from residents regarding alternative options for local decision making. For example, the establishment of more than one multiple parishes within the borough. And this sentiment is present elsewhere in the Governance Committee report. That is, councils in the plural, so by implication more than one parish, as an alternative to a town council. So I think there's a disconnect in the governance of this council, unless Councillor Lunnan is going to be invited as chair next week to move a change to the terms of reference so that it eliminates all mention of councils in the plural and eliminates all mention of the possibility of multiple parishes within the borough boundary. So either this draft corporate plan is preemptive or making assumptions it shouldn't be making at this stage ahead of the governance committee, or the governance committee agenda has some wording errors. I just wonder which it is.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's scrutiny of me rather than Councillor Lunnon at this meeting. But just to respond to some of the points, I mean, thank you to Councillor Lunnon. I mean, I wanted to be very clear with this document. It's a strong document for letting people know of our statement of intent. We don't have much time left, but what we're going to do with that time is going to be very, very meaningful, and I intend it to be. In terms of addressing Councillor Lanza's points, I'll be upfront. I think a town council is a good idea. I don't want to preempt the community governance review when it begins, and if proposals come forward for something different from any part of the community, naturally we will consider it. We'll be going to great lengths to raise awareness of the community governance review with local people over the coming weeks. I don't think personally that the corporate plan as it's drafted precludes any or restricts any discussion of the various ways that a town council or councils could be manifested. We do not have a closed mind on this just yet, but clearly whatever comes forward as a result of the consultation will also need to stack up and be administratively workable as well. So we will obviously cross that bridge when we come to it. But I'm happy to look at the wording again, Chair, but my feeling is that the corporate plan at the moment sets out a general intention to move forward with some kind of parish tier, and that's what we're doing. I don't see any harm in what we've written personally.
Councillor Lanza.
Well, thank you, Chair. Well, I have to disagree. The wording of the strategic priority in the corporate plan is a town council. I'm not taking a personal position on that, by the way. I'm open to what residents say in the community governance review. But the way it's worded compromises the community governance review. Now, you've kind of hinted, Councillor Jones, that you might look at the wording again. I earnestly suggest that you do, because the governance committee is going to approve a community governance review set of terms of reference. It's going to engage with the public. But if the public read what looks like a predetermined position, why would they want to engage with us? I really think you need to review the wording.
I'd love to think that the public will be reading the corporate plan that closely, Chair, but I will endeavour as well in our communications to just ensure that we are having a genuine review and we want to hear what people say. I think that's already been incorporated. But between now and Cabinet, I will ask the Deputy Chief Exec to take a look and consider the points made.
Are there any other questions from the floor? I had one minor suggestion that I might ask, just possibly be looked at on the 5 priorities on the local economy. I just wondered whether a very small inclusion or wording on a diversity statement on the types of jobs that we're looking to try and ensure that are available. The reason I say that is because it kind of feels that it flows through the rest of the report. It may be in that statement, but I will leave that with the Cabinet and yourselves. So just in that first statement.
So not just green jobs. Is that
a broad and diverse set of jobs.
Okay.
Yeah, it flows. It felt it flowed in the report. Whether you might include that just in that bullet point or not, but I don't know. I'd leave that entirely with yourselves.
No, absolutely, Chair. I mean, obviously, we want to have a diverse economy that, and clearly, one thing that COVID and lockdown showed us was that that's a very desirable thing to have. So, I'm sure we can. I'm sure we can look at addressing that.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I mean, yes, any small change like that we can consider. I suppose the only thing I'd suggest is that the first recommendation is about developing an economic and placemaking vision, and I think Councillor Russell, by making the statement in the committee, you're making a suggestion about what we would want that to include. We want to include diversity of jobs in that. So whether we need to specifically write it in this or not is a matter for ultimately for Cabinet and full council. But I think the point's well made, and we would certainly want to include that in any vision or any economic and placemaking vision that we would want a diversity of jobs within the town.
It was just a thought, because the report does seem to speak to that. I wonder whether in that brief bullet point statement. But okay, is there anything else that people wish to raise? All committee members now had the opportunity to speak, so I would thank the officers absolutely for the corporate plan. And I move that the Commission notes the report and request the views expressed during the debate are fed back to the Cabinet through the Commission's comment sheet, which I will do. And I ask the Vice Chair to second this, please.
Yes, I'll second that.
Okay. Is that agreed? Agreed. Okay. So the recommendations are agreed. So we now move on to the Social Housing Delivery Report from Ben Hook, Head of Strategic Housing, and Russell Allison, Housing Enabling and Development Manager. Councillor Irvine, Cabinet Member for Housing, is also in attendance. This is following the notice of motion in March 2024, which stated in its resolution that the OSC should receive an update report regarding the social housing delivery that had taken place during the last year in 2024. Therefore, this report is not going to Cabinet. So can I please ask you to present the report? Councillor Irvine and officers, I don't mind who.
Thank you, Chair. Well, you'll be pleased to hear that I'm going to introduce this as a councillor, which is obviously different from an officer, but I'm very happy that the officers, Mr Hook, who's a Head of Strategic Housing, and Russell Allison, who's our Housing Enabling Actor, Housing Enabling Manager, are here tonight to answer any technical questions. You remember, it was only 18 months ago, actually, that the motion was carried at full council. It seems like a lifetime ago. We had a different government then. A lot of things have changed since then. And since then, I mean, I think this report gives a very detailed summary of what we've done over the last 18 months. It's been frustrating for me personally, because we haven't been able to do all the things that we would have liked to have done, particularly in delivering more council housing. But the large obstacle to that has obviously been the water neutrality issue, which we have actually managed to do something about eventually, thanks to officers in other parts of the council in introducing the water credits. But we haven't exactly been idle in that time. We've pursued extra grant aid for our housing programme. We've been proactive in trying to find more temporary accommodations, so that we don't have to use expensive nightly paid accommodation, and so on and so forth. If you've got any questions, I'm sure the officers will be happy to answer them. I would like to say, though, Chair, one particular point. In the first resolution, it mentions about using housing cooperatives to speed up the delivery of new social housing in Crawley. And as far as I'm aware, no housing cooperative has approached us to ask to work with us or for any assistance. And I looked into this, and the only housing cooperatives I could find anywhere near us were in either East Sussex or London. And they seem to be very sort of niche cooperatives, whereby people with a common interest, which could be a care for the environment or something else, get together, buy some land, develop the land for housing themselves, and then that is their cooperative. They cooperate in maintaining the properties and looking after them. It's not as though they're a body that's looking to expand. So I think that, to all intents and purposes, there aren't actually any housing cooperatives that we can cooperate with. But obviously, if anyone did come forward, then we would look at that. So in essence, one thing that did make me smile a bit today, I looked back at the original motion, and it said that in 2023, the council only delivered 30 new council homes. And I thought, well, okay, so it's only 37 to us, but it's 37 more than an awful lot of other councils have delivered in that same period of time and longer. So I think overall that taking into account everything, the report on our housing revenue account, our future programme, the positive report we have from the social housing regulator. I remember that a few meetings ago we were compared to a football league, and I would say that taking it all into account, actually, that far from being in the Championship or the League Two or whatever, we're actually definitely Champions League status. Thank you.
Did the officers want to add anything to those words? I mean, I think I would mention just some things that we said at the pre-meet here, and taking on board what you said about the number of units delivered are immensely important to those that are benefiting from them. There are a series of things that are now in place that means, I won't say the floodgates can open, but there are a number of things there. So I don't know if I'm happy to run through those or whether you guys want to mention them. The temporary accommodation that's been done, the brownfield release, the HRA, and there's just a whole string of wonderful things that means we can open up, and the water neutrality 800 units that we've got, which is a phenomenal asset. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think the key one, particularly under Resolution 2 about the additional council and affordable homes coming forth, is a really pertinent point. And as you say, the work of Russell and particularly the local plan team over the last few years in trying to overcome the water neutrality issue through the development of the water credit scheme, which we've then obviously generated our own water credits, means that actually we are probably the only organisation that can plan to build at the moment with any degree of certainty. And I think the council has taken a really proactive approach to that. And as you know, we've looked at previous meetings, both of that there is a strong development programme there, and that's outlined in terms of the HRA presentation that came forward earlier this evening, that it's both affordable and deliverable. So I think there's a really positive future in terms of the delivery of council housing, obviously in terms of that wider housing economy for which social housing is a part but also reliant upon. I think it's important that we shouldn't underestimate just the level of impact that the water neutrality issue has played just in terms of suppressing development across not only the borough here but obviously near neighbouring authorities as well. So I think but in terms of council houses, the future's obviously optimistic.
Okay, are there any other questions, anything from the floor, any observations? Councillor Lunnan?
I mean, again, I welcome the report. I think it shows really good work that we're doing here to increase our social housing stock in challenges we're facing. My specific question was just around the brownfield land release fund and how many houses we might anticipate on the 3 different sites. I don't know if you have those. I don't need exact numbers, just a rough guide to, we've got these 500 houses roughly that are hopefully being built over the next year or 2. This might give us an idea of what's further down the pipeline in the next year or 2 after that. So I just wondered if you can comment on that.
Yes, indeed, through you, Chair. The 3 sites in the brownfield land release fund is the Old Town Hall site. You might know we had outline approval for 182, but there were 182 dwellings, but that had to be, because of rights of light, that has to be reduced. We've factored the bid on 132 dwellings. We have yet to see how that's going to manifest, because obviously there needs to be a mixed use, so there will be some elements of non-residential. We can go for the brownfield land release fund as low as 100-ish, so we can have a 25% tolerance. The second site is Longley House. There we have approval of 121 apartments. And the third site is Deerswood Court, the garage courtyard site, where we've got 13. So far, that's what our pre-application conversation is, around 13 modular pods that we're looking to develop on that site. And those are the 3 sites. So in total, we're looking at just over 300 properties there. 250.
Okay. Any other comments or observations? Councillor Irvine?
I just want to say, Chair, thanks for the comments and the lack of them. And thanks also for the opportunity to present the report. But of course, I think really the thanks have to go to Russell and all the other officers concerned for their doggedness and determination in ensuring that we do actually have a future house building programme. Without them, it wouldn't have been possible. Thank you.
Absolutely, very much so. And at risk of stretching the sports analogies, I think, given the size of the council, we really do punch above our weight on this. It's absolutely fantastic news as to what's going to be coming in the future. So, top job. Thank you very much, gentlemen. So all committee members have had the opportunity to speak, and I would absolutely thank the officers for a very, very positive report. I move that the Commission is asked to note the update and request that the views expressed are acknowledged and documented by the officers, and I ask the Vice Chair to second that, please. Is that
Yes, I second that.
Okay. Is that agreed? Okay. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move on now to, I believe, item 10. Oh, sorry, that's item 9, isn't it? Oh, sorry, item 10, sorry. Yes, ask. The last meeting of the HAS took place, I think, on the 17th of September. Councillor Khan, could we please have your update to the Commission?
Yes. Hello, everyone. I have my update for you all. I realise we've been sitting here for almost 3 hours, so I'll try to be as brief as I can while relaying all the key information from the last meeting. So the last meeting was a bit shorter than usual, and there are 2 items of contention which I would like to bring to the committee's attention. So the first item I would like to bring to the committee's attention is the Future Care Programme, and is a Future Care Programme update and a new time proposal. So West Sussex County Council directly runs 6 residence homes, and they are collectively, and these are part of a wider service collectively known as the Directly Provided Service. A programme of work called Future Care has been launched to review the approach to providing directly provided residential services in West Sussex, and this will consider the best approach to that. So the committee have been asked to scrutinise proposals and is asked to access proposals relating to future care. So the focus for scrutiny on this one is whether the outcomes of the review will provide a clear rationale, the impacts on the services, and whether a suitable alternative capacity within the market will be needed, and to identify any comments for consideration, and to identify any issues for future scrutiny. And the next item I would like to bring to the committee's attention is the performance and resource report. So this was also presented, and so this report is, as usual, the Council's reporting mechanism for corporate performance, finance and savings delivery, risk and workforce, and it has been designed to reflect priorities, outcomes and measures included in the Council plan. So when we go to adult services, of the 7 measures, 43% are reporting as green, 14% as amber, and 43% as red. The number of red rated key performance indicators has remained the same since last quarter, and and for public health, of the 10 performance measures, 20% are reporting as green, and 30% as amber, and 50% as red. The number of red-rated KPIs has increased the same since the last report, and as at the end of June, the forecast for the public health and wellbeing portfolio is a balanced budget. So yeah, those are the 2 items which I would like to bring to the committee's attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Khan. Do any members have any questions to the House report? Councillor Lunnan.
Thank you. My question is not specific to the report, but I wondered, about 18 months ago, maybe, it was announced that Crawley Urgent Treatment Centre would not provide overnight care anymore, and I wondered, this has obviously been implemented, and I wondered whether this topic has been discussed and reviewed, the impact that this has had at the West Sussex Health and Social Care Board Commission, and if not, could it be discussed so we can sort of see if Crawley residents particularly are suffering from the impact of this decision?
Yes, thank you for that question. That has obviously been a massive contention. I do not believe it has been discussed, but I definitely believe that's worth bringing up. So I will definitely bring that up. Thank you.
Councillor Hellier.
Yes, I can only add with the personal interest that I have, and I'm actually party to the board meetings that actually happen. So I can say that it is something that is discussed at board level. I obviously can't give you any more detail than that, but it also because I represent Crawley, I have actually been there myself and actually seen it operate firsthand and actually discuss with the staff the benefits of the urgent treatment centre, what it means to actually the staff, what it means to our people. So it isn't something that does go unnoticed, but it is under review and does get discussed, just so that you know.
Yes. Yes, thank you for your comments. Yes, I understand that this is a massive contention. I've also had my concerns about this and the decision on the urgent treatment centre was actually very disappointing, and I was very disappointed to learn that too. And I do believe this goes on a wider context of the NHS and more funding that needs to be available for centres like this. So, yeah.
Okay. Are there any other members' questions? Right. Thank you very much, Councillor Khan, for that. Then we move on to item 10, the forthcoming decision list. The forthcoming decision list is featured on your agenda and also on the Council's website. I'll ask Heather to list those that have been referred.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to inform the Commission that for the next meeting on the 3rd of November, the Commission is due to receive the annual transformation plan update. It has also invited the Cabinet Member for Resources for the Cabinet Member discussion, and that will take place on Monday, the 3rd of November. In terms of reports, currently there won't be any Cabinet reports, or there aren't currently any Cabinet reports that have been referred to OSC on that date. Obviously, that's likely to change. So anything that coming forward will either feature on the agenda, or if there's anything coming through, councillors obviously get copies of the emails when an FDN is published, or if there are any changes on the FDN list, they're always published on the website anyway. The one that's on the agenda isn't coming forward, it's been deferred to late November, so that won't feature on the early November. But if anything changes, obviously that will be published on the website. But currently on the 3rd of November, it's the annual transformation plan update and the Cabinet Member for Resources update.
Okay, I was just checking with Heather. We've got 12 minutes left on the exempt item. I don't think we're going to get through that in 12 minutes, so I would ask so that we don't break off halfway through any discussion for the formality. I'm going to assume that we're not going to finish in the next 12 minutes. So, as the meeting won't be completed within the 2.5 hours, I will put to a vote whether the councillors wish to continue. I'd like to remind the Commission that the majority of items are those that ourselves have opted to consider tonight. Should the committee vote to continue, the meeting will continue for another 30 minutes. It doesn't have to be the full 30. If required, there may be a further extension, but we should be able to do that within that. So, all those in favour of extending for another 30 minutes, please raise your hand. Okay. Yep. And any against? I think we should be able to get through this quite quickly. Sorry? That's carried. Okay. So we'll now go to Part B, the exempt reports. This is the confidential section of the meeting. Therefore, under Section 100A, 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded from the meeting for the following item of business on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act by virtue of the paragraph specified against the item. The recording and live stream will now finish, so I wish to thank anyone for watching. Thank you very much. And we will continue in just a moment.